Hi everyone and welcome to the sew along video. So first things first, this pattern is designed for a woven fabric. So we are going to be using our plain sewing machine, and our seam allowances on this garment are 1 centimetre, which is 3/8 of an inch. To finish our edges, I'm going to be using an overlocker. So your overlocker only needs 3 threads in it just to tidy the edges, but I'm going to use 4 threads because I like my edges tidied with 4 threads, entirely up to you. So the main thing we have to think about with this garment is that you need to make this in a really light flowy fabric. The fabric I'm sewing today is a chiffon, and it's got a linen embossed look to it, so it's opaque, it's not see-through, but it is a very light flowy fabric. Because of this, we really need to think about our needles in our sewing machine. So generally I use a 90 for everyday needle, but because this is such a light chiffon, I'm going to switch to a 70. So have a good think about what needle you're going to use. There's no need to have a ball needle, as I said this is a woven fabric, but make sure you put a nice new needle into your machine and it will make sure that you give a lovely stitch. Now don't forget to test your stitch on some spare fabric before you begin to get the best result, and make sure your stitches are set to 20/5. This garment has thin straps on it, and I've put strap adjusters in this garment. So you're going to need 2 sets of strap adjusters, and you're going to need a zip, which is 25 centimetres, which is close enough to 10 inches. You're also going to need some fuse, which is fusible interfacing for the front and back facing pieces. I will show you how to insert these strap adjusters, but if you don't want to use strap adjusters, you could just make the garment, try it on, and then fix the straps into position. So when you're ready, let's get started. The first thing we need to do is to fuse our front and back facing pieces. So when you've fused your facing pieces together, this is what they'll look like. I know my fuse looks ugly, but it's actually, this is a really good fuse for this weight of chiffon. So you'll know the front facing from the back because the front will have a single notch and the back will have a double notch. So place those pieces right sides together, and we need to sew the right hand side seam together here on the facing piece. So it's just a very short seam, and all we're going to do is sew that at 1 centimetre, which is 3/8 of an inch. Remember to back tack at the beginning and end. Okay, so now we're going to go across to our overlocker and tidy up the inside edge of the facing. So as I mentioned earlier, we really only need 3 threads of overlock to finish this off, but I'm going to use 4 threads just because I like the look of it. So what we need to do is take this piece that we just sewed together, and we want to sew the inside edge. So we want to overlock to tidy this inside edge. So starting at the left hand side seam here, all you want to do is just overlock and tidy up that edge so it all looks nice and pretty. When I get to the seam here, make sure that that seam is press open and keep going to the other side. The other thing is I have adjusted my overlocker settings to suit the fabric I'm working with. So pop that aside somewhere safe, and now we're going to work on our straps. So the strap pieces I'm working with today are designed for an 8mm finish. That means you've got to be pretty accurate. Now this is because the strap adjusters I've bought are designed for an 8mm finish. Now of course, if you're not using strap adjusters, you can adjust the width of the strap to suit. So we've got cut 2 straps, but we're actually going to cut a little bit off them when we finish. So there's 2 ways you could sew these straps. If you have a wonderful loop turner, you can put this right sides together, sew it and turn it inside out. And if you don't, you can go to your iron, press under 6mm, press under 6mm, and it's basically pressing so that the raw edges are in the centre, like that. And then you could stitch that together like that if you want to. Completely up to you. So I'm going to use the loop turning method because I like my loop turner. So all I'm going to do is fold my strap piece so that that long raw edge is right sides together, and then I'm going to sew this with a foot width seam. Now the foot width seam is 6mm, which is 1/4 inch. So the main thing with this is make sure that when you cut this, it's cut nice and straight, and we want to make sure our strap is really even. And to use my loop turner, I'm just going to pop that through the centre. Catch and hook it. And the hardest thing is always the beginning part. Once you can feed the beginning part through, the rest of it will just follow nice and simply. Okay, so go ahead and repeat that for the other strap, and then go to your iron and press it flat. So press it so it's nice and flat with the seam on one edge. Right, so take your front pieces and place them right sides together, and we're going to sew the centre front seam through to the crotch. And this is a 1 centimetre seam, which is 3/8 of an inch. You have a notch to match here. Okay, so now go to your overlocker and overlock on the edge of that to tidy it up. Now because we're here and it's easy, what I'm going to do is overlock the hemline to tidy it up. As well as doing that, up the outside seam there is a notch here for the ankle split. So what I'd like you to do is overlock across the bottom hemline, and then we want to go up the side seam. So here is our turn position for our hem, We want to go up past this notch, and we want to go 2 inches or 5 centimetres up past this notch. And we're just overlooking on the edge to tidy that up. You can go further if you want, but don't go any less than 5 centimetres or 2 inches. So down to the hemline and then across the hem. Okay, so pop that front piece somewhere safe, and we're going to repeat what we've just done exactly the same way with the back piece. Okay, so here are my back pieces, right sides together. I know they're my back pieces because it has 2 notches together in the centre back, and we're going to we're going to sew 1 centimetre through that back place, and we're going to remember to back tack and sew at 1 centimetre, which is 3/8 of an inch. We're going to overlock that seam to tidy it. Now I'm going to come down to the hemline, and I'm going to overlock across the bottom. And then up the side past that 10 centimetre notch. So place your back right side up, so that's the one with the 2 notches, and place your front right side down. So what we want is right sides together, like that. And what we're going to do is we're going to sew the seam here, which is the right side seam. We're going to sew it here down to the hem at 1 centimetre, which is 3/8 of an inch. Remember to back tack and match the notches as you go. Okay, so now we're approaching the area that we previously overlocked. So what you need to do now is find the notch, and you should be able to see it through your overlocking. And if in doubt, it's 10 centimeters up from, which is 4 inches up from the hem notch. And we want to stitch down, and we want to stop and back tack directly opposite that notch. You can see the notch just there. Okay, so when that seam is done, now what we're going to do is turn this, and we're going to sew the crotch seam, and we're going to sew from the hem up through the crotch and down to the hem on the other side. So match the hem and sew. Now let's go to the overlocker and tidy up those seams that we just sewed. When you come down the side seam, you're going to come up to the overlocking we previously did. What we want to do is overlock off at the lowest point. So around about 2 inches, 5 centimeters, just re-overlock and overlock off. Because this is going to become our split. So the remaining seam we haven't sewn yet is where we're going to be putting our invisible zip, which is also called our concealed zip. So you'll see a zip notch down here around about the 10 inches, which is 25 centimeters point. So what we need to do is we need to overlock through a single layer from the top, which is the curved edge, down, and you want to go again 2 inches or 5 centimeters past that point on one layer on both sides. And just overlock that off. Okay, so go ahead now and put your invisible zip in. If you need a tutorial on that, there's a paid tutorial on the website. Right, so once your so once you've put your zip in, we need to now finish the rest of the seam off. So come to the area below your zip, and it'll be around about where your overlocking is. And now we want to stitch the side seam at 1 centimetre down the outside of our garment, matching our notches. Just like we did before, we're going to come to the area that we had previously overlocked. Gosh, this is slippery, sorry, it keeps falling off. Okay, so find that notch there, which indicates the top of our split here, and stitch down and stop directly opposite it and back tack. Okay, so now go to our overlocker and finish that seam. And same thing again, come down and overlock off where these two edges meet here. And you want to make sure you're around about 2 inches or 5 centimetres up from this notch area. So here is the zip here, and we want to overlock that together, so the area underneath our zip so slippery. Okay. And so we want to come off wherever it looks nice and tidy. Like that. And you can go ahead and do some quality control work later and tidy up these threads. So we want to make sure we're finished at least 2 inches or so above there. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to sew our facing into our garment, and we're going to start by sewing the facing to the back first. So here's the zip here, and this is right side up. So take your facing piece and place it so that we have right sides together. And if you look up the side seam here, we'll have a double notch there, and that should match the double notch there on your facing. So if that matches to there, that will stitch in like this all the way up to the top. So go ahead and stitch that in a 1 centimetre seam, and we want to go from the zip here up and off this corner, because this is where we're going to put our first strap in. So we need to sew this, and then we're going to pin stitch it. So when you've sewn that, what we're going to do is pin stitch this. Some people call it understitching, but we want to come back as far as we can to the zip, which will be around about an inch, inch and a half. And then we want to make sure we turn, we're going to have this, we want to stitch here on this side through the bulk here. So all you do is turn that over and line up the edge of your presser foot. And we want to stitch 1/8 of an inch, which is really a millimetre or two, probably smaller than an eighth of an inch. I'm going to say 1/16, just on this edge here, and the purpose of it is to help our facing roll to the inside. So all we're going to do is just sew that all the way up. Okay, right, so when that is turned through, that is what we're going to see, and we'll press it in a minute, and we're also going to stitch that down at 2 centimetres, which is 3/4 of an inch. So basically we're going to be stitching through that overlocking, but not yet. So this is going to be the position here of one of our back straps. So we're going to need to take one of our strap pieces. Now the back strap, we need a piece that's 8 centimetres long. So this strap is designed to be the front and the back as well. Now I am now going to show you how to put in the strap adjusters. If you're not using strap adjusters, just skip this part of the video. So what we need to do is cut off 8 centimetres of strap. So that's just over 3 inches. It's 3 and, I'm going to say 3 1/4 inches. Doesn't have to be perfect, but close as you can get it to 8 centimetres, 3 and it doesn't matter, because if you cut too much or too little, it will be taken up for at the other part of the strap at the front. So we have this piece here, we've cut 8 centimetres off. So put the strap aside because we don't want to cut anything more off this one. Okay. Take one of the strap adjuster rings, place it inside it. Now, unless you've made a really bad job of pressing this, it won't matter which side that seam sits. But what we want to do is make sure those ends are together. Come over here. I'm just going to tack stitch this here on the back piece within the seam allowance, so shorter than 1 centimetre, which is 3/8 of an inch. So we just want it to sit there like that. When it's finished, it will sit up like this, but don't worry about that for the moment. What we have to do now is sew in the other side of our facing here. So match your facing on this side and sew that through to the other side. Matching all your notches as you go. Now this side, of course, we're going to run through the side seam. As we approach the side seam, we want this seam here to sit exactly on that stitch line, and we want the bulk to sit towards the back. So I'll just pin that in place so it's in the right place when we come to it. Okay, so come back to this back area here, and we edge stitched on this side, so now we're going to edge stitch on this side as well. So we want to stitch through the bulk of the fabric I'm calling it pin stitching because that is what I've been called. It is actually an edge stitch, but edge stitch is a top stitching effect, so it is called a pin stitch. Pin stitch is designed to help roll the fabric to the wrong side so you don't see the facing. And it's called pin stitch because it's supposed to be a pin width away from the seam. Do not stretch this as you go. Okay, so come back to the back and we're going to put our other strap adjuster in. Take the other strap, measure off 8 centimeters, which is 3¼ inches. And if it's a little bit messy at one end, that's alright, just tidy it up. It won't really matter because that will be hidden within the seam allowance. So we want to go up 8 centimeters and snip that off. So that's 3¼ inches there. Okay. Then we want to get our other strap adjuster, the ring part, and place it inside. And we want to fold that over like that, so it's all sitting nice and flat. And then we're going to come to the back part here. We want to tack stitch that in on the back, as close as we can get it to that seam of the edge. Okay, so now we have those in place, we can finish, whoops, what's happening here? We can finish that top edge off. So what you'll find is this has slightly rolled, and that's exactly what we want. We want it to sit so that it will help roll it to the inside. And as we go across, you'll see 2 notches here. They should sit exactly the same distance away from the seam on either side, and you'll know it's in the correct place. Okay, so what we can do now is just cut a slight angle off. It will help give you a lovely sharp corner, and then you can turn that through. And now what we need to do is pin stitch through this edge here. So I'm going to make sure I can get as close as that strap as I can, and I'm going to pin stitch that edge. Now this step isn't essential, you can probably skip it if you want to, but it will give you a really nice finish. So now we've sewn in this side, we now need to sew in the other side. So right sides together, and this is the front. Place the front facing to the front piece here, and we want to sew this side. So just like we did before, we're going to be sewing down here in a 1 centimeter, which is a 3/8 of an inch seam. And remember to match the notches as you go. Okay, so for this area here, I'm going to do a setback facing. If you'd like to learn how to do that, there's a paid video tutorial on how to create the setback facing. So what that is going to do, and I'll show you because I've done it on the other side, is it just creates a nice little setback for the zip. But you can finish this area off however you want. Right, so if you do want to use that setback method, that is how the inside of your concealed zip will look like when you're finished. And this is what it's looking like from the outside. Okay, so now we need to pin stitch this side as well. So come back to where you started from, place it like this, open that out, and we want to stitch on the facing side. And we want to stitch it pin width away from that seam. So it's not 1/8 of an inch, it's very small, it's pin width. And that just helps the roll. And now you want to be taking this as far as you took the other stitching on the other side. So around about 1 inch, 2.5 centimeters from that edge. So it's just going to help our facing, sorry about that, sit towards the inside. And you can go ahead and do some quality control work and tidy up threads as you go, or you can tidy them up at the end. Right. So just like we put the straps in that position at the back, we're now going to do the same thing for the straps at the front. So out of habit, what I'm going to do is find the edge of the strap with the seam on it, and I'm going to put that facing the facing on that side, and I'm going to do the opposite on the other side. So just put that strap in the correct place, which is here. Put the facing over the top of it, and then sew across the top in a 1 centimeter, which is 3/8 of an inch seam. So I'm just going to start that off, and then I'm going to make sure that my notch for the center here is sitting on top of that seam. And then I'm going to get my other strap, and I'm going to make sure that my seam is facing the outside. And I'm just going to place it in the same position on the other side. Now of course you could tack stitch these into place if you find it easier, but we want to make sure that they are sitting right butted into the edge. And that they're sitting nice and flat, and stitch across. Okay, so when you turn it through, what you want is that strap sitting as close to the edge as you can get it. So now I'm going to pin stitch the facing edge here, and I'm going to start around about 1 inch from the edge, and I'm going to finish around about the same on the other side. So that's 2.5 centimeters ish. It's doesn't really matter as long as it's consistent. Right, and a little bit more quality control work, of which I need to do quite a bit with this fabric simply because it's so light. Alright, so now we're going to do some top stitching. And this is just purely for, I was going to say purely for decorative effect, but it's not, because we actually need to use this top stitching to hold this facing in place, but it does add to the design of it. So what we're going to do is edge stitch at 2 centimeters, which means we're going to be stitching through this overlocking. Now, up to you. You can either stitch it from the back of the garment or you can stitch it from the front of the garment. I'm going to stitch mine from the front of the garment just to keep it all nice and consistent, because I can see the edge a little bit better. Now, I don't want to start directly on top of the zip area. I want to come in from the zip area. So maybe 6mm I'm going to start, which is 1/4 inch. Now the width of this top stitching will also depend on how accurately you've sewn the seam here, because this is designed to have just short of 2 centimeters, which is 3/4 inch as a top stitch effect, but you might need to adjust that depending on how accurate your width is. So all I'm doing is I'm using my stitch widths as a guide, and I can actually feel the edge of my facing as I go as well. So when you stitch, what we want to do is make sure nothing stretches. We want this to sit nice and flat. And you can control this a little bit better from the front of your garment than the back. And I've run out of bobbin thread, so I'm going to go and rethread my bobbin now. Right, so sorry about that. I just need to start again. Okay, so let's continue stitching up here. Now as we approach the upper area here, we want to change from a 2 centimeter top stitch to a 5 centimeter top stitch. So I'm just going to just keep an eye on where my transition is, and it doesn't have to be perfectly accurate, but I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop with my needle down, lift my presser foot, turn and pivot so that I can go across the top of the back of my garment, and then just stitch again. So the exact width you do this on the back doesn't really matter, it's entirely up to you. What does matter is that you stop again 2 centimeters, 3/4 inch from the other side with your needle down. Going to lift our presser foot, turn and pivot again. And we're going to work our way down the other side. As you can see, we're approaching the front of our garment here. Just going to keep an eye on that, turn and pivot, and then stitch through the front. Now when I stitch up here, I didn't mention, but you can see here how our facing has turned to the inside. We do want to make sure that that is sitting nice and pushed out on the top edge. You may want to go and iron that, just to make sure it sits nice and flat and that it's easier to stitch. So you want it sitting just like that. Same thing again, 2 centimeters here, turn and pivot. And make sure when you come down to the zip on the other side that you finish the same distance away you started on the other side. So I'm going to just make sure I finish 5 mil, 1/4 of an inch in from the edge. Alright, so now let's work on the hem area. So come to one of the legs, and this is the split at the outside leg. What I've done is I've gone to my iron and I've just pressed that under 1 centimetre because the seam here is 1 centimetre. 1 centimetre again is 3/8 of an inch. Now the hem I've allowed for is 2.5 centimetres, which is 1 inch. So I'm going to take a really easy way of doing this is that you'll see a notch for the hem. You might see it easier on the other side here. And that shows us the position that we turn the hem up. So what I'm going to do is actually just create, just to hide the edges, I'm going to turn that so the hem is turned up at the notch position, 2.5 centimetres, and I'm going to stitch 1 centimetre from the edge. This will just give me a really nice clean edge to my split. I'm just going to stitch up, and we should be exactly on that fold line, because what will happen is when we turn this right side out, as you can tell, there's a nice clean hem there. So I'm going to use my machine to stitch this hem in, but of course if you wanted a really tidy look you could hand stitch that in. So because I did that on that side, I'm going to do exactly the same thing on the other side. Do right sides together at that notch position, and just double check your sewing before you go too much further, and stitch that up. Right, trim my overlocking back just a tad. So here is my split and my hem, and it should all be nice and even. What I want to do is stitch my hem, stitch up the split, across and down. So where you start this is completely up to you, and whether you want to sew this from the inside or the outside is completely up to you. What I'm going to do is start around about 2 centimetres, which is 6 mils short of the top, and I'm going to start in around about, oh, it's not quite a centimetre. So what I want to do is basically I'm stitching on the overlocking line, and I want to stitch the split open. One layer only. We want to stitch up the side of the split. I'm going to stop just 1 stitch past the top of the split, turn, and then making sure everything's sitting nice and flat. I'm going to stitch across the top of the split, turn, and stitch down the other side of the split. I'm just going to check my hem is the correct width. Okay. So now we've just sewn the split open. And now I'm going to turn and pivot and just stitch the hem in. Right, so go ahead and repeat that on the other side, and then we're going to work on finishing this off, which is putting the strap adjusters into the straps. Okay, so with our garment right side out, the front at the front and the back at the back, take your strap adjuster and place it wrong side up. We want the hook at the inside and we want the loop at the top, so making sure that you don't twist the strap, go through from front to back, Then take this, and making sure it's all nice and flat, we want to go from the back of the garment to the inside of the garment. Don't twist anything, and then come back through the strap adjuster with that underneath. So we need to go back through the same loop. Like that. And don't twist anything. Just double check it's all nice and straight. And then what you're going to be doing is stitching that down. So I'm just going to pull it through a little bit more. Because what's going to happen is that then that's going to hook around like that to finish our strap adjuster off. But what we need to do is just to stitch this into position. So when you know it's in the correct place, so here's the back. So I've just realised I probably am not being very clear. So I've unhooked that. What we want to do is turn, it's hard to describe, you want to turn that down. So this is it's facing right side out at the moment. You want to turn that down like that, and this part needs to be stitched to this back strap here. So you only need to leave maybe an inch, but whatever you do on one strap you need to do on the other. So just turn that under and stitch that into position. And if you're worried about that being the wrong place, just tack stitch it to start off with, and you can adjust that later. So when that's looking like that, so that's what you're looking for. When everything is correct, then all you need to do is just loop that up, and that will finish it off. So what that does is makes you have an adjustable strap length there, and it's all nice and tidy. And as you see, there's my inch between there and there. So whatever you did on this strap, go ahead and do exactly the same thing for the other strap, and you're finished. And thanks for joining me with this sew along video, and I look forward to you joining me for my next sew along video soon.